Pamela and Daga. It's October 16th, 2008, and we're in my sister's house in Camden, South Carolina.
Pam, do you have any remembrance of when you first heard about the Women's Encampment for Future Peace and Justice?
Tell us where you were living and stuff at the time. What was going on for you then?
I was living in Geneva, New York, with my husband and our daughter, Rachel. And I think I first heard about it through the Women's Resource Center in Geneva. They started to become a little bit involved with some of the pre-planning.
And what was the Women's Resource Center in Geneva?
It was a group of women who just got together primarily to try and help lower income women in particular, and to help them with providing resources like tools, even things like that, like tools and job skills. And there was a food cupboard, and we had workshops there, and it branched off into a lot of different things. There was a volunteer rape crisis service then, and from that we started a domestic violence council. So there are all kinds of things going on there.
That you were a part of prior, that you had been a part of?
That I'd been a part of, but not a real active part after my daughter was born, really. So I was still friends with some of those women, but I can't say I was real active in it at that point.
And had you been doing anything in the area or around nuclear weapons or anti?
No, not really. There wasn't too much going on at that time. There was a nuclear freeze group that started in Geneva. It started really at the colleges, and I did get involved with that, but I think at that point, maybe in 1982 or something, there wasn't really any sort of organization, at least not that I knew about. So it was more just going to things at the colleges. They'd bring in speakers. And do you remember Larry Campbell? Did you ever meet him? Larry was a physics professor at Hobart, and he was somebody who was really active in the freeze movement. He started a nuclear freeze group there, and he used to bring in speakers. So I think that was really when I first became aware at all.
And had you heard of Greenham? Anything happening at Greenham
No.
when you first heard about it?
No, never had. Mm-mm.
And so what was it about the idea of a peace camp at Seneca Army Depot that you wanted to get involved?
Well, I think having my daughter, really, that's probably the major impetus. Just that after Rachel was born, I was just much more concerned about the kind of world that she was going to live in, whether it was going to be safe or not. I'd been involved in the anti-war movement back in the 60s, and I think also because my family was originally from Romulus. My grandparents still lived there. Yeah, I lived there for the first 3 years of my life, and then we moved to Geneva. And I remembered that land, a lot of the land where the depot was orchard at one point. Used to be apple orchards there. And so I'd spent a lot of time in Romulus because my grandparents still lived there. So I think that was part of it too, just the idea that this was going on, and it was right, kind of, I mean, literally in my own backyard, but also right where my family had lived. And so.
And your grandparents were still living there?
They were dead by the time that,
okay.
By that time, yeah. But.
So can you give us a little bit of your impressions when you first went over to the encampment?
I think the first time that I went over, I went with some other women from Geneva, and we were women who'd kind of been involved in that stuff, primarily stuff at the colleges around the freeze movement. So we went over together just to see what was going on, and it was just really amazing energy, just this sort of carnival atmosphere. It was really, really different from what we had expected, I guess. And I think just being kind of thrown into that environment where you couldn't find anybody to kind of ask what was going on, you know, it's just that we were used to something that was a whole lot more structured, and we had to figure out how to deal with that and what this was about, whether this was something that we really felt part of, especially being local people, because there was so much hostility, really, animosity on the part of a lot of the people who were living in the area, and who didn't really feel safe, I guess, even in going there, some of them.
So do you remember about what, like, had the camp been open for a few days or weeks when you went?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It had been.
Yeah, it had been open for a while. I can't remember when we first went, but definitely had been open for a while. At that time, I was really caught up with taking care of Rachel, and we were going to go, my friend Gwen and I, who had 2 young children as well, and her kids came down with chicken pox, and that kind of sidelined us for a while.
What did your husband, did you guys have any stuff around it being women only, or was he supportive, or how did that play out?
No, he was supportive, at least certainly in the beginning. We had similar politics, and so no, that was not really a problem for him. In fact, there was over that winter in '83, Bill actually stayed there with me and with Rachel for a little bit. We had permission to do that. He didn't go in the back land, you know, he kind of followed all those boundaries. I forgot exactly what they were, the front yard and then the barn and so forth. And
So you were there for a bit that first winter?
just for a few days. I don't mean for very long. It was a time when no one was going to be there, and I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were. I think they were worried about vandalism, and we had just kind of offered to stay there, so we did. And
then the summer of '84, you were very involved.
yeah, I got more involved in '83 too later on, but
Wait, but don't jump up to '84 yet, because
Okay.
we haven't done.
I think I was telling, I forget who it was, one of you, about that Gwen and I helped to organize a group of people, of local people, to go out there in '83, and that was after the incident at Waterloo, when the tension was really, really high after the arrest there. And we had a symbolic walk in Geneva that went from the Armory, the National Guard Armory, to one of the churches, and then there were buses and cars that brought people out to the encampment, and just to spend kind of a day there, find out what was going on, meet women, and we had over 100 people went to that. We tried really hard to get women involved at the encampment, and some of them did. I remember Tony Fitzpatrick helped a lot with that. She was one of the speakers, and Jan, the Lutheran minister, I don't remember her last name, one from Minnesota. She got involved because she, I think, had also been to speak at some local churches, so people kind of knew who she was and were comfortable with her. And this was a group of men and women, and it was mostly just a lot of everyday people who weren't particularly political. A lot of them got involved through their churches because Gwen had done a lot of publicity that way, and they came out and sat on the lawn and talked and saw some films, and that was a good day.
So did you have to contact women at the camp to say we want to do this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we wanted to talk with them and try and coordinate it and just see, are you open to this, first of all? Do you want us to try and bring a whole bunch of people there at one time? And I can't remember everybody who was involved. I really remember Jan and Tony, and I know there were other women who were involved too, and I just don't remember who they were anymore.
And can you remember, what were some of the concerns of people that had?
I think at that time that there was some concern just in terms of, well, if is this going to actually hurt the local peace movement? Is this going to hurt our fledgling little nuclear freeze group and so forth? Because is it going to alienate people to such an extent that they're not going to be open to what we're trying to do too in the local community? I think that was probably the biggest worry, that there really seemed to be a dichotomy, a real us and them, confrontational kind of aura that went on there at that point. I didn't see a whole lot of effort to include local women or local people. And when I was saying earlier, if you look in the local papers, like the Finger Lakes Times and the Reveille from Seneca Falls and the Chronicle Express from Penn, the real local papers, you could feel that kind of worry and that fear. And over again, people were reassured that this was local people who were involved, but those local people weren't local. They were from Rochester, or they were from Syracuse, and they weren't considered local. No one, the average person didn't know who they were, so that they wanted to hear that it was the person who lived down the street, or their kid's teacher, or the person who fixes your car, or whatever was involved. And that was where I felt like there was very little effort made to include any people who were truly local, from Romulus and from Waterloo and Seneca Falls and Geneva and Penn and all the little communities around that area. And that sometimes when we did try and get involved, there was didn't feel particularly welcomed. And there was a real conscious effort to turn that around the next year, that definitely. But in '83, I think a lot of us did feel that way.
Why? What kept you involved if you weren't entirely welcomed?
Well, feeling that certainly that I believed that what we were doing was right, and to me there was a tremendous amount of energy there that I didn't find anywhere else. I mean, I did like the idea of women's community. I liked that it was women's only space, and but I thought that, or I realized that was alienating to a lot of people. So maybe it could have been dealt with differently. But to me, there was just this huge amount of energy that I hadn't experienced in a really, really long time. Probably not even during the '60s, things I was involved with then. And I think that was because it was all women's community. That was what made the difference to me. I think really trying to put that sort of feminist politic into action, that it wasn't so academic, it wasn't so much, there wasn't so much debate and analysis, and that was something that I learned to appreciate, or at least learned to try to appreciate, because I remain probably one of the more analytical people for sure, but that was something that just inspired me, that I hadn't been around before, not with that sort of energy. And I learned a whole lot about trust, a whole lot about trusting women, trusting myself, and trusting that somehow the right decision would be made. I was part of that that whole decision about whether to fly the flag or not. I mean, with hundreds and hundreds of other women, but all of us just sitting there, and I had gone with my friend Gwen, and we just stayed because we just couldn't somehow believe this was happening. It was like, we've just never seen anything like this. We have to stay and find out what happens. And we thought this was just such a beautiful decision. It was so perfect that everyone flies their own flag. And here it was this huge issue in the community. I don't know how many people, I don't know if it was portrayed. See, I'm looking at the media end of things again, but whether what people read in the newspapers really conveyed what happened there. But to me, that was just a real affirmation of how decision making could work, how it could work on that level. Even, I don't remember how many women were there at that time, but certainly hundreds, and that was, for me, that was really a whole new experience. That was something that said, I can trust myself in a different way than I have before, that, we really can have a new politic. We really can do things differently. And I felt that was very much because it was all women. So I really wanted to maintain that.
And how or when did you get involved in the media aspect of the camp?
I got involved to some degree in 1983 because Gwen and I had organized this walk, and so we had started talking with people. Her husband, she and her husband both were taught at Hobart William Smith, and had also been real involved in churches there. So we started doing things at churches, talking to just groups of people, and as a result of that, the newspapers started calling us and asking us what we thought about this or that happened. So that was really probably how I got involved with it to start with, just through that. And
you had the authority to just speak at churches or stuff about the encampment? How?
well, we weren't speaking as as anything for the encampment, which you never could anyway. Do you remember my T-shirt? I used to have a T-shirt that I wore for interviews, and it said, "Not a spokesman for the girls at the ladies' camp." That was the shirt. So it's like, no matter how many TV interviews I do or newspaper, I'm never, ever, ever a spokeswoman. This is me. This is it. I could give you factual information like how deep is the well and where do we strike water, that kind of thing, but I can't speak for anybody else about anything really. That was a really hard job. Yeah, it was a crazy job. But when Gwen and I were doing this at churches, we were absolutely not speaking for the encampment. All we were doing was trying to get a discussion together. That was it. To get people to come and talk about it, and also to talk about the Pershing missiles and talk about the freeze and everything else. So it was from that sense, just to get a discussion going.
And do you remember any of the organizers or core people at the camp that you met that summer? In '83, the first summer, did you have interactions with folks?
Well, like I said, really the person I remember having the most interaction with was Tony Fitzpatrick. And I do remember Andrea Rudner, remember meeting with her, and Jan, very definitely, because she came into town a lot. There was a woman named Helen, and I'm trying to think, she was a professor in the Albany area. Helen, I can't remember her last name anymore, but she taught, it may have been physics also, I'm not sure. So she knew Larry Campbell, who it's kind of helped to get the freeze group going in Geneva, and she came pretty often. She came to speak at different things. So she was somebody that we had quite a lot of contact with. It's been so long that I don't really remember. There were a lot of, and we'd have different meetings sometimes, or we'd ask people to come in and talk, and different women came each time. So I don't remember. Yeah.
And did you spend the night? Did you camp out at the land in '83?
Mm-hmm. Yep. We did probably about 3 times or something. Gwen and I and her kids. I didn't bring Rachel. I did bring her a couple of times in her stroller, but I never did camp.
And did you get any kind of response from neighbors or friends in Geneva about you being a part of the peace camp, or was it supported?
At that point, I think it was pretty much supported, at least where I was. My neighborhood was right smack in the middle of the colleges, and pretty much all of my neighbors were people who had some association there, so they weren't people who would be terribly, wouldn't find it offensive. They were people who would be more open to listening, and they might share a lot of similar politics, so that wasn't a problem then.
And given that your family was in Romulus, and you knew the base when it was apple trees, what did you know about the base over the years, and did you have a sense of what was happening there before other folks, or? No,
I really didn't. To me it was just, I knew it was used for storage of military material, I never thought nuclear weapons were stored there. That wasn't something I knew. I mean, later we found out that waste from the Manhattan Project had been stored there and tritium had been stored there, but no, I had no idea of that. And then there was more and more information came out, and one of the things that I had always known people who worked at the depot. I mean, it was the biggest employer in the area in Seneca County, or at least that end of Seneca County for a while. And my best friend Sandy's father had worked at the depot all the time we were growing up. And one way, they would never confirm or deny. Remember, after that's just military policy. But I remember her father telling me even, he said, well, we have people there that are nuclear specialists. We can't confirm or deny, but why do you think we have nuclear specialists there? So that was, I thought, his way of telling me, well, yes, of course, that's true. But I don't ever remember when I was growing up or later even any discussion about it at all, about what went on there. A lot of local people didn't like the idea that the land was taken over, that the orchards were gone, but they liked the fact that it did provide some jobs, and the white deer, I guess, were probably what I remembered the most. We used to go to look at them when I was a kid, go to see the white deer.